Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Luis Fernandez. If you're watching us on YouTube, please be sure to like and subscribe for more local news coverage. About 150 students at Crossroads Flex High School are without a school building after a fire marshal intervention. It all started with a phone call in 2023. A Wake High School administrator made a routine call asking when the last time Crossroads Flex High School had a fire inspection. The problem: the Wake County Fire Marshal's office had no idea a school was even there. WRAL education reporter Emily Walkenhorst joins us now. Emily, thanks for being here.
Of course, glad to be here.
So to get to know how all of this happens, I feel like we have to know what Crossroads Flex High is in the first place. Tell us a little bit about this unique school.
Right, so it's a specialty high school. If you heard 150 and you thought that was a small high school, it's because it is. It's pretty niche. It started back in 2016, basically to serve students who had a lot of other obligations. So think like really competitive soccer players who might travel to Charlotte to practice, stuff like that. So basically you go to that school for several hours in person in the week. It might be, let's say, a few hours, a few mornings a week, and then you take your core classes in person, and then the rest of it is typically virtual. To be able to do that program, they've been operating since 2016. Under state law, they had to become a remote academy back a few years ago, where they're basically kind of a hybrid of in-person and virtual.
So that makes sense, right? Crossroads Flex, the name even makes more sense. Mm-hmm. Where does this become a fire marshal issue? I think that seems to be the crux of the story.
Yeah, so basically it's because it's a building that has people in it. It's the responsibility of some fire marshal to inspect it. So Wake County Fire Marshal does a lot of school inspections. The town of Cary, where this school is located, was looking at it as a business. And so, the call to the Wake County Fire Marshal's office, they're like, what? We have this down as a business that's inspected by Cary. And so they didn't really know what this administrator was asking about because they just didn't have a record of it being a school. They're like, well, we don't inspect this.
So, forgive my ignorance on this front. I imagine that there are different standards for a business building versus a school building. What were some examples of that?
Yeah, so it comes down to density, right? So businesses oftentimes are less dense. So if you need a fire system or a sprinkler system, you have to meet certain criteria, and usually you have to be a much larger building with a lot more people going through it. And then at a school, the threshold is much lower. You need only a few students going, and it basically to trigger the requirement of a sprinkler system or a fire alarm system. And then there are a few other non-fire related requirements, including like a staff bathroom and a kid's bathroom, stuff like that.
Things that are second nature when you're building a school, for example. So we've established there's this call. The fire marshal's office is notified. Can you take us through what's happened here in the past few months that has ultimately resulted in these students and parents kind of having to make some adjustments and move things around a little bit?
Well, so some context to start with is this is an office building. If you've ever been to the Wake County School headquarters, it's in the Crossroads area by the mall, and there's a series of office buildings, and this is kind of over near them. They lease the property, and they have actually two schools there, but one of them does not regularly have students. It's SCORE Academy, and students kind of rotate in and out for counseling. And then Crossroads Flex is in the other half of the building where students were, having classes. And so basically, what happened was in 2023, there's this call. The Wake County Fire Marshal's office doesn't really understand it. Well, they put the location down as a school. They kind of change it in their books. They start inspecting every 6 months. And then they start kind of saying, I don't think this completely complies. The town of Cary gets involved. And, they come together in the fall of 2025 to basically say this is clearly a school. We've been there. We looked at it. This really needs to meet the standards of a school and not just this business. And one of the reasons it had been operating as a business is, the location before it was a school was a business, and it's just an office building. And the school is relatively small. If you have students rotating in and out, maybe there aren't a ton there at any given time. But technically under zoning, if you have 6 students for an educational use, you are a school. And then there are certain fire system requirements that kick in once you get to about 50 students. So they kind of went back and they said, okay, well, you have to be at 50, and we think you're above that too much.
So it's, this is still not a large school, but those standards when it comes to like an education building versus a business building, they're very high. There's a lot of difference there. So the new year rolls around. Where are these students now? What's currently happening with them?
Right. So after the school essentially got shut down for having too many kids in it, the original plan was, okay, we're going to go virtual for the whole rest of the school year, starting January 5th. People didn't really like that. But then the plan for the fall of 2026 was to move to Garner. So they stuck with the Garner plan. They were able to find a few classrooms at Cary High School that weren't being used, so that they were able to move the students temporarily this semester. So virtual only ended up lasting a couple of weeks. Now they're at Cary High, and then next year they will go to Garner. Late Friday, the school told parents that the Garner plan will be in place for 2 years, and you can be virtual that whole time. If you don't want to go to Garner, you can be virtual.
I imagine with location like Cary, that was a much more central location, at least if you're Wake County focused, than say Garner. What are parents saying about all of this? I imagine the just kind of uncertainty, all the changes, it may not be kind of going over well with them.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a very different high school to begin with, but a lot of parents really liked the school because they liked that their kid would still physically go somewhere. They'd be able to make friends in class, have study partners, and they could join clubs. Like yearbook is one that I think a fair number of students are in because they keep hearing about that one. They can have other in-person events that if you were all virtual, you wouldn't really know your classmates all that well. And so a lot of parents felt comfortable with the school. Okay, well, I'll send my kid to a non-traditional school, but they're in person. So they really, really did not like the move to virtual. And then Cary High is actually really close to this current location, just a few minutes away. So a lot of parents are fine with that arrangement. But Garner is kind of where it becomes tricky. Now, Cary still wasn't that close for, let's say you're, northeast Wake County, that's still a pretty good trek for you. But Garner is actually still kind of far for a lot of those same families. And now it's also much farther away for some northern Raleigh, west Wake County families. And so a lot of them just don't want to make the trip. And because it's a longer commute and they're thinking, well, I just don't really want my 16-year-old driving on almost all interstates for up to an hour during rush hour.
Right.
Yeah.
And one thing, reading through your story, which, by the way, you can find on WRAL.com, one thing that stood out to me, too, was, it's these kids that were going to the school were, like, very high achieving, correct? They were doing a very good job. It's not the education that was so much in question. It's more of just the physical building itself.
Right. The school is flying colors academically. These are really motivated students, but the logistics around the move is really what's getting people. And even if you're generally doing well academically, you might still have a subject area where it's just better to be in person. Sure.
I think the example you gave in your article was math, which kind of falls in that that kind of core, class section that they were doing in person. So you mentioned the Garner situation. You mentioned that kind of 2-year window. What does the future look like for Crossroads Flex High School?
So the school system really wants to find another place for it. That's something they said they've always kind of thought they would need to do. And this has really just accelerated their need to find another location. Now, you have to find something that's relatively centrally located, that is either outfitted already to be a school or pretty close to that. Like there are costs to making this conversion. I know the current landlord, according to the school district and fire officials, the landlord wasn't quite interested in making that change. Those changes wouldn't happen overnight. So you really have to find the space that's already ready, or could be outfitted soon enough. I think they're looking, and I am not enough of a real estate expert to say how easy or difficult that is, but they're looking.
I'm sure you'll keep us updated as they learn more and we find out more about the future of Crossroads Flex High School. That is WRAL education reporter Emily Walkenhorst. Emily, thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Once again, if you're watching on YouTube, please be sure to like and subscribe. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.